Welcome to part 2 of the custom minis in Talespire video. This video is for the people that want to bring their own custom assets into Talespire. So either you've been looking at other people's assets, downloading them, playing with them, and said to yourself, I can do better. Or maybe you just want to bring your own party's minis into the game. Well, in that case, this video is for you. Now, as we discussed in the previous video, the plugin to use is Calp, the Custom Asset Library plugin. And as we also mentioned, Calp no longer supports, or never did support, the OBJ MTL loader. So that means you will need to create asset bundles using Unity in order to bring custom assets into Talespire. Now, I'm not going to go through the process of actually making those asset bundles. There are a number of videos that are available and a number of documents that are available for that purpose, so use those. I will probably be making a third video that goes over the very basics of that, because I've made some videos for the purpose, but they've all included animation, which doesn't make it ideal for beginners. So I will probably be coming out with a third video, but for now, I'm really not going to cover that. What I'm going to be covering is, once you've made your asset bundle, what do you do? Now, I will make a couple of notes. Calp still does use the convention that the asset bundle and the prefab inside your asset bundle need to have the same name. So whatever the name of the asset bundle is, please make sure that your prefab is named the same way. Otherwise, Calp will not be able to find your prefab, and of course then your asset will not show up in the library. The other thing to pay attention to is make sure that all of your meshes and textures are marked as read-write. If you do not mark them as read-write, there's a good chance they will not work. And the last thing that I will note is Calp, due to Unity and Talespire, has a limitation of 256 poly count. Now, that's way beyond what you should be using anyways. Most Talespire assets should be around 6 to 12 or 6 to 16 K poly. That's basically the number of vertices or faces that your asset has. So the 256 limit is a high one compared to what your assets should normally be. But if you are coming from something like, let's say, Daz Studio, your poly count will probably be a lot higher than that. And I've seen a few users come back saying, my custom assets aren't working, what's the problem? And when we look, they're around 600K poly count. So yeah, make sure that your poly count is low. Again, the ideal range is about 6K to 16K. That makes sure that people who have less powerful devices can still use your assets. If you're making bosses, they can be a little bit more, but do keep in mind that if you're sharing these on Thunderstore, somebody could use something like the replicator plugin once it's fixed to spawn many copies of your asset, in which case, if it's a high res asset, you're going to run into problems. Okay, enough of that. As I said, look at videos how to create those assets. I'm going to now assume that you've made your asset, you've built it, so you have the asset file. The asset file should have the asset file name with no extension. So once you've got that, in previous plugin versions, typically the Talespire _ custom data folder was used in the game directory. We are moving away from that. Calp no longer supports that folder. Other plugins will still, any plugins that use a file access plugin will still support it, but Calp does not. So there is a new process, and that's what we're going to discuss here. So what you need to do is you need to locate the folder where your plugins are installed. Okay. Typically on a Windows machine, that's going to be your C drive or whatever your main drive is. Users, then your username, such as Lord Ashes. App data, roaming. R2 modman plus dash local. Talespire, profiles, and then your profile name. Typically that's default. I have a special profile called modded, but usually it's default. Bepanex and plugins. If you go to that folder, you will see all of the plugins that you have installed. This will include plugins that you have disabled but have installed. So that is the folder where all your plugins are. It should be noted that there's actually two folders for plugins. This is the plugins install directory, and that's the one you want. This is where the actual plugin or asset bundle runs from. There is a second location that is the cache, and that has basically a copy of all of the plugins that you've ever downloaded, but that is a cache, a reference area, so that the plugins can be more quickly downloaded, but that is not the location where the plugins actually run from. So the location that I've given here, that's the location that your plugins run from. And what we're going to want to do is we want to create a new folder in there. That folder name can be anything. I typically go with local content, and for reasons not related to minis, but for reasons for other plugins, I put square brackets around the folder name. What that does is that makes the folder alphabetically first, and what that does is any plugin that is looking for some kind of, let's say, configuration file. Typically, plugins use file access plugin to find such things. File access plugin just allows the plugin to search all of the other plugin directories to try to find content. So if you have a plugin like, let's say, icons plugin, you can have a pack that adds on additional icons, and because icons plugin uses the file access plugin, it will basically have access to the other packs. The file access plugin searches alphabetically, so basically by making your folder alphabetically first, it means that if you later on put any kind of configurations into it, those configurations will be read first over any other configurations. So not really related to minis, but it's worth doing that. So once we have created the folder, and again, the folder name doesn't really matter. I tend to use local content because that makes it evident what it is, but you could call it anything else. Within that, however, you need to make a custom data folder. This is important. If you skip this step, it will not work, and it is very important that it is actually called custom data. And I would be careful. I would capitalize the C and D. I'm not sure. In most cases, it shouldn't matter, but I think there might be a few cases where it actually is looking for that specific casing. So custom data, one word, but the C and the D capitalized. If you're not familiar, custom data folders is what the file access plugin has access to. So if you download a plugin, anything outside of custom data will not be available to other plugins. Anything inside custom data will be available to other plugins. And finally, under the custom data plugin, we put in our content. Previously, with CMP and EAR, content was supposed to be put in a subfolder following the asset bundle name. That's no longer necessary. You can have, as you can see right here, I've got some assets that are just straight in the custom data folder. I've got some examples where I have a subfolder called minis. I also have a subfolder called tiles, but tiles are not quite yet supported. We're close, but not quite there. So under the custom data, you can have however many subfolders you want, multiple levels of subfolders. That's up to you. Anything under the custom data folder will basically be accessible. So once you've done that, you are basically ready to go. So now, if you run Talespire, Talespire will notice that there is a new pack available that it hasn't registered, and it will register that pack. What that does is the folder that you see is going to get changed a little bit. You are no longer going to have a custom data folder. You are now going to have an assets folder. It will also create a portraits folder, and it will also generate 4 files: one index.json, one register for vanilla, and one unregistered. So once the asset has been the pack has been registered, now those assets will be available in the library just like any core assets. So basically, that's it. Now you may be asking, well, what if I test my Mini and it's not quite right? I go back into Unity, I fix it up. What do I need to do? Do I need to delete the whole local content folder and start over? No, you don't. So the real answer depends on what did you change. If you changed the appearance, the mesh of your asset, but didn't change the info.txt file or the portraits.png file, then you can just come in here, go into the assets folder, which used to be the custom data folder, and just replace your asset bundle. Then start up Talespire, and you'll be good to go. If you did change anything in the info.txt file or the portraits.png file, the process is a little bit more difficult. Well, not really. What you'll need to do is use the unregistered.bat file. Click on that. What that will do is basically revert your pack back to having the custom data, not having portraits, not having index file, getting rid of those files. So it basically unregisters your pack, and then next time you run Talespire, it's going to register it again with the changes that you've made. So the latest version of Kelp also allows you to tweak the info.txt file, or the contents of the info.txt file, without going back to change the actual asset. This is useful if you're trying to do some testing, adjusting some settings. You can basically use this method, and then once you've found the settings that you like, you can go back to your asset and change them permanently. And that's pretty well it for creating your custom content. Next, we will discuss, okay, so once you've created your custom content and it looks like it's good to go, it looks like it's working and looks as you expected it to, if we want to share it now, if we want to make it available on Thunderstore, how do we do that? So first thing, very important, make sure you are legally allowed to share it. If, for example, you have made an asset pack based on Hero Forge assets, you cannot share those in Thunderstore. You can do a limited sharing. You can create a pack, which we'll discuss in a moment, and share it with your group that you're playing with to be able to use that asset. But you cannot do a mass share because the licensing for Hero Forge Minis prohibits that. And that will be a case with a lot of websites that provide custom minis or meshes. So make sure that the license agreement allows for mass sharing before uploading to Thunderstore. Okay, so in order to either share your content locally with the other players, or to upload it to Thunderstore, we need to make a asset pack. Now, in theory, if you're sharing with your players, they could use the exact same method that we just described here, and that would work. But making an asset pack is easier and nicer, because then it shows up in R2 Modman. You can very easily uninstall it, disable it, and so on, which you cannot do with this local method that we described here. So let's talk about making an asset pack. So before we go on to show how to make an asset pack, let's discuss what happens when something goes wrong. Yes, there are many steps in making a custom asset and making it work, and there is a good chance that somewhere something will go wrong. Sometimes just forgetting to set a setting or putting it in the wrong folder can mean that things don't work. So what do we do in such a case? We could immediately post a question on Discord, but we don't do that. Posting a question immediately on Discord when the answer is readily available is not a good use of anybody's time. The content developers are busy making more content, and although we love to answer questions to get more people using plugins and content, we would like to focus on the difficult questions and not something that can be easily fixed by reading the documentation or taking other measures. So please, before you post a question on Discord, check the asset pack documentation to see if it has been answered. A lot of the asset packs, especially plugins, have good documentation that will cover most of the common errors, common usage. So please check the documentation first. After that, if you still don't have an answer, please check the pinned messages in the support channel. For example, right now, there is a pinned message saying that most of the plugins currently are broken after the BR Hero Forge integration update, and there is a list of plugins which have been either updated or have been confirmed working. So by checking the support pinned messages and seeing, oh, look, I'm using this plugin and it's not on that list, that's probably why you're getting an error. So please check the pinned messages in support. And then, if you do not have an answer to your question, then please post a detailed question in Discord. Remember, the more detail you provide, the better chance somebody is going to be able to help you. If you post a really vague question or a snapshot of a tiny piece of an error, it's going to be a lot harder to help you. Somebody's going to have to come back and say, please give us more information. So please try to post detailed questions. And the very important thing, logs. If you get an exception or a problem, don't post a screen capture of the exception. In most cases, that'll help narrow it down a little bit, but it won't help us solve your problem. What we need is your log file. Your log file has a lot more information for us to work with to try to resolve your issue. If you don't know how to get your log file, check the frequently asked channel. It will tell you where you can go and find your log file. Your log file is always active for the last session. There is actually an additional log file for the session before that. And besides the specs of your computer and what plugins you are running, the log file doesn't have any personal information, so it is fairly safe to share with others. If you're still a little hesitant about that, instead of dropping it into the support channel, you can PM me or somebody else with it, and they can help you without showing your log to everybody else. In order to provide your log, it's very simple in Discord. You just drag and drop the file over to either the channel or a PM, and that will upload that log. Unless you've been running a session for a really long time, then the log can be very big. But if you are trying to provide a log for a an exception case, please don't provide a huge long session. Restart your Talespire, do whatever it is that causes the problem, and that way the log will be much shorter for us to review. If you have a really, really long log, it's going to take us much longer to go through it and find the problem. Okay, so making an asset pack. So as discussed, we've shown one method for you to bring custom assets into Talespire, but it's kind of a roundabout method. You have to make a folder, drop stuff in it, and now if you want to share that with anybody else, they'd have to do the same thing. So instead, we're going to make an asset pack. Asset packs can be loaded locally, or they can be uploaded to Thunderstore for anybody else to download. The advantage of using asset packs is that they will show up in R2Modman as asset packs. You can, from there, uninstall them very easily. You can disable them, and so on. The disadvantage of using asset packs is if you need to do a lot of testing of your asset, creating the asset pack each time takes extra time. So typically, the method that was shown earlier is the method that you will use when you're testing your asset, and then once you're happy with it, you will create an asset pack. Most of the time, you can just upload that asset pack directly to Thunderstore, but if you are new to making asset packs, it might be worthwhile to first load it locally, see that it works correctly, and then load it up to Talespire. Thunderstore. Anyways, so making an asset pack. In order to make an asset pack is basically a zip file with some mandatory files and then some optional files. So the easiest way to get your kind of mandatory files or the template is to download the zip file of an existing plugin, and that's going to have those mandatory files in it. You can do that very easily by going to Talespire thunderstore.io, picking a appropriate asset pack, and then instead of clicking the install button, you can click on the version number, and that will actually download the zip file for you. And then when you open the zip file, you're going to have contents similar to this. Now, your contents may be slightly different depending if you are making a plugin or a asset bundle, but I will go through that. So the 4 mandatory files are the icon.png, license.txt, manifest.json, and readme.md. Those files must always be present in the zip file. Now, on top of that, in the root, if you are making a plugin, you will have 1 or more DLL files for the actual plugin. So in this particular case, I'm showing the lookup plugin, which is a plugin, so you can see that lookup plugin DLL is in the root. Now, on top of that, there is the possibility of having a plugins folder. R2Modman works a little bit. Well, there's method to the madness, but basically, when you install a pack, it will install anything that's in the root, and then anything that is in the plugins folder, it will copy over to the installation folder exactly as is. So normally, if you want anything besides your plugin DLL file to be copied over, such as, let's say, asset bundle minis, you need to place those within the plugins folder to tell it to copy them over. Now, within the plugins folder, if you are creating a asset bundle, you once again want to create that custom data folder and place it in there so that once again, different plugins get access to it. So as we discussed earlier, anything inside the custom data is basically accessible to other plugins. Anything that is not inside the custom data folder is only accessible to that particular pack. So in this particular case, with the lookup plugin, the lookup engine is only accessible to the lookup plugin. Other plugins can't use it, but anything under the custom data, in this case, subfolder of providers and sources, which then have content, is available to other plugins. Okay, so it mimics kind of what we did in the local content folder, except there's this extra step or extra hierarchy of plugins before we get to our custom data folder. Okay, so the icon.png file is just a PNG file, and it depicts the icon that is going to show up in the Thunderstore. I recommend not changing the size, just basically replace it with your icon. If you are going to be using just the standard Thunderstore icon, and you have grabbed one of my packs, Lord Ash's packs, as a template, please make sure that you remove the Lord Ash's icon in the corner, since you are not Lord Ash's. The license.txt is basically a license for the pack that you are creating. I typically just use the license that's been used by other plugins. I don't bother to modify it. If you want to, go right ahead, but I just use what all the other packs are using and don't modify the license.txt at all. If you happen to have some kind of assets that have conditions on them, for example, that you have to give credit to the original creator or something like that, you could potentially add that into the license agreement. But for the most part, just copy that file over, don't touch it, and then we have the manifest.json file. This is a very important file. You need to modify this file, otherwise you're going to cause lots of problems. So the manifest.json file basically describes your pack. So under name, you are going to give it a unique name. So in this case, lookup plugin, but you can call it whatever you want, but just make sure that that name is going to be unique. Don't use something very common, because then you will get naming issues, conflicts. Then we've got the version number. The version number really, it's a three-part number like this, but when you decide to increase each number is up to you. What numbers you start with is up to you. Really, what it's there for is if you ever update your pack, when updating a pack, you need to use the exact same name and then increase the version number by some amount. That way, Thunderstore will recognize, oh, it's the same pack, it's an update, and it will treat it as an update to your pack as opposed to a brand new pack. Website URL is, you can leave it blank if you want to, but typically if it's a plugin, I point to the GitHub repository or wherever you're storing the source code. If it is an asset pack, there's no real source code to that, so you can point it to something like the Thunderstore general URL, or you can even leave it blank. Description is a short description of what this is. So if it's a plugin, what does the plugin do? If it's an asset bundle, what kind of assets are inside? And then lastly, there is dependencies. The dependencies, well, tell the system what other plugins or asset bundles you need in order for your pack to work. Normally for plugins, you will see entries here, as you can see for lookup plugin. It has reliance on file access plugin, on chat service, and extra asset library, and so on. I'm not even sure that it should have a dependency on extra asset library, but not important. If you are making asset bundles, it is recommended not to have dependency. Yes, your asset bundle cannot be used if you don't have a plugin like Calc, but the issue with specifying a plugin here as a dependency like Calc is you are locking your asset pack then to be used only with that plugin. So later on, if Calc gets replaced by a new plugin, it's going to be a problem because that pack is now going to say, no, I can't work with you, I need Calc. This is exactly what happened with the extra asset registration plugin. Some content developers made their asset bundle dependent on EAR, and now when we switched to Calc, EAR wasn't installed, so the asset pack was not usable. This is why we made that fake asset extra asset registration plugin that basically doesn't do anything except says, yeah, extra asset registration is installed. So if you are making a minis pack, highly recommended, don't put any dependencies in, and that way, yes, the user will have to download some plugin to be able to use it, but it will be then usable with future plugins. Similarly, the replication plugin currently not working, but it will be updated to work again. And again, if you specify that you need Calc, then you could not use your asset packs with replication plugin alone. You'd still have to have Calc. So that's why if you're making mini assets, keep your dependencies blank, and that will save a lot of troubles in the future. Okay, and then the other file that you want to modify is the readme.md file. Realistically, you can put anything you want in this file, and this is what is going to be displayed in Thunderstore when you look at the plugin. However, there are some highly recommended sections that you should include. You should start off with a brief description of what your pack contains. If it's a plugin, what does it do? If it's minis, then maybe a list of what minis are included would be a good suggestion. And I also recommend, again, not a requirement, but I highly recommend it, is if you are mixing creature and effect types. So sometimes, the effect type is obviously used for effects, but in certain cases, people will make a creature using the effect type so that they can get transparency. If you have any of those, it might be good to list in brackets the type that it uses so that users can see that. Because, for example, effects don't hide. So, if you list this creature is using effect kind, the user will immediately know, okay, that creature is not going to be able to hide. Whereas if you don't put that, you'll probably get a bunch of complaints. I'm using your blah, 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 and it's not hiding. Why? So, just a recommendation. Typically, we like to include a changelog. So every time you update that same pack, you provide a brief description of what was changed. And then the other recommended sections are installation and usage. So installation, for most stuff, you can just say use R2Modman to install. But if you've got, for example, a plugin that requires some additional configuration or something else, you would add that there. Same thing for usage. Usage is more for plugins because typically you have to tell the users how to use it. Whereas for minis, there's not much to it. But you can also include any other section, any other information that you want to include, shout outs to people, credit for who created the original meshes, whatever you like. It's just a documentation file. Okay, so once you've got all of those files ready, once you've put your content into either the root, if it's a plugin, or into the plugin's custom data, if it's minis, then you just take all those files and zip them up using regular zip compression. And the recommended naming convention is the username or handle, whatever you want, dash name of the pack, dash the version. I think technically this is not required, but it is a good convention to use because it quickly identifies who it's from, what it is, and the version. Okay, so you've made your pack. You've zipped it up. It's ready to go. So again, if you're quite confident with making packs, you can then go straight to the step of uploading it to Thunderstore. But if you are still beginning and you're not quite sure if you've made the pack correctly, you can do a local test first. To do a local test, go into R2Modman. Under the settings, if you scroll down, there is import local mod. If you select that option, you'll be able to then select the asset pack zip file that you just made, and it will upload it into R2Modman, just like if you downloaded it from Thunderstore. So you will see it in the list. You'll be able to disable it, enable it, uninstall it, but it will have loaded locally, so you haven't yet put it into Thunderstore. So that means if you have a problem with the asset pack, you haven't yet committed it to others, and others aren't going to download it with whatever problem. So now it's installed. You can go and run Talespire. I do keep in mind that if you install it this way, delete your local folder that you were testing with, because otherwise you're likely to get a conflict. So once you run Talespire, it should the assets should show up in the library just like when you were using the local content folder. And if everything is good, you are good to upload it to Thunderstore. Uploading a pack to Thunderstore is very easy. Just go to talespire.thunderstore.io, and at the top you should see a upload option. If you do not have an upload option there, it is probably because you haven't signed in. In order to upload stuff, you do need to sign in. There are multiple ways of signing in. I happen to use the GitHub method because my plugins have their code stored in GitHub, so I've already got a GitHub account. So you can use a GitHub account. I believe there are also other options. But to do the upload, I believe you do need to sign in. Once you are signed in, you can click on the upload button, and it will bring you to a page similar to this. For team, you will have to create a new team. Typically, if you're just going to be creating content yourself, name the team after your username or handle or whatever you wish. If you're going to be working in a team with multiple people, then you can create a team name. For example, I use Lord Ashes as my handle to distribute content, but when I'm working in conjunction with Hollow, then we use the plugin masters team. Once you've created the team, drag and drop your asset to the blue area here that says choose or drag file. You can also click on it and choose the file if you don't like to drag and drop. And lastly, in categories, select the appropriate tags. If you're creating minis, that will most likely be assets and minis as the tags, but depending on what content you're using or creating, you may add other things like effects. And then hit the submit button, and if you are lucky, you will get 2 green bars, meaning that your package was accepted. If you do not get 2 green bars, typically the error messages that show up are not all that useful, but most likely the manifest.json has a error in it. The most common error that I find is when you're adding dependencies, do not put a comma after the last dependency in the list, but that shouldn't be a concern with minis because, well, as I said earlier, you probably shouldn't be having any dependencies for minis packs. Anyways, once you get the 2 green bars, it does take about 10 minutes or so for the asset pack to appear in Talespire and to trigger the mod update in Discord. I like to go in, and when the pack is shown, when it shows up in Discord that there's a new pack available, I like to go in and just put a short comment there indicating what has changed from the last version of it, or what the highlights of the pack or plugin are, but that's just purely optional. You don't need to do that. You can just submit it here and wait 10 minutes, and then it should be available in the Thunderstore website and in R2Modman's online category or tab. And that's basically it. Once you've got it there, it will be available for other users to download. And if you need to update it, just remember to keep the name and the team name that you are uploading it with the same. Otherwise, if you change either the name or the team name, Thunderstore will not recognize it as the same plugin. It will create a new version of the plugin, and that gets really confusing. And that's it. I know these videos don't have great production quality, but they do have a lot of useful information. So please appease the YouTube algorithm goddess by casting the subscribe spell and then blasting your Eldritch Blast at the like button. It'll really help me out.